9 years later, and I still have to represent my team. Oh, yeah. If you still say Team Iron Man, you're wrong, but I gotta pay my respects because he did die for our sins after all. Peace and love, y'all. What is up, everybody? Random Random Man here, bringing you my review for Thunderbolts in one take. Yes, this is the latest film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the plot of this superhero film follows the titular group of anti-heroes who are caught in a deadly trap and are forced to work together on a dangerous mission. Going into this movie, I was looking forward to it, as I look forward to mostly every Marvel movie, though, as many people have said in recent memory, after Avengers Endgame, or at least after the first three phases / the Infinity Saga have ended, Marvel has been on kind of rocky ground. We had Phase 4 happen, and now this movie ends Phase 5, and yeah, we've been back and forth between the feature films and the streaming service shows on Disney Plus, which I admit I have not seen all of them, mainly because I have been burnt out on a lot of what has been just going with the brand and seeing how the stories have been trying to play out with the multiverse saga. However, the Thunderbolts movie seemed interesting because this is, I guess you would say, Marvel's attempt to be like a Suicide Squad type of movie, but also using characters that mostly have appeared on the outskirts or have been supporting characters in other films or TV shows. But I think that with a lot of the cast here, I am a fan of them and their characters, and seeing how they would come together. And it looked like it'd be different as well too, given that the tone of the movie is a lot more serious. And now seeing the movie, I can attest to that. But first off, going into the cast and their performances. Starting out with the cast and their performances. We have Yelena Belova, played by Florence Pugh. I love Florence Pugh. I've been a big fan of her since her breakout year in 2019, where she had Midsummer and her Oscar-nominated turn in Little Women. And here, she was one of the best parts of the Black Widow movie. So I think that automatically she's one of the best parts of the Thunderbolts movie. You can tell she's still dealing with a lot of trauma that she dealt with in the Black Widow movie, and then still reeling from stuff in her past. And then, switching hands here. Here we go. And with that, I think that she is just a commanding presence. She is a movie star through and through. And despite her being the shortest, I think, out of all of the team members here, she really knows how to just go ahead and lead on and just make her presence known. And most of the other cast that I am pretty into as well too. Speaking of Black Widow, we have David Harbour returning as Red Guardian, the two best parts of the Black Widow movie here in the Thunderbolts movie, which in a lot of ways plays out like a Black Widow pseudo-sequel with a lot of things being called back to and followed up on. David Harbour, who doesn't love David Harbour as Hopper from Stranger Things, and here is Red Guardian. He got the most laughs out of the audience, including from me. And just seeing them together as this father-daughter dynamic, that was, again, one of the best parts of Black Widow. Wyatt Russell comes back from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show as John Walker, the discount Captain America, Walmart Captain America, whatever. We get a little more into his whole side of things, even though we had the show go into a lot of what his deal was. But I think with him, him being snarky, him being being a jerk, basically, and just being this specific muscle for the group, I thought that worked in well. Hannah John-Kamen returns as Ghost from Ant-Man and the Wasp, and she had more to do here than she did in that movie. She had an interesting backstory and an interesting thing with her powers too, being able to teleport, phase in and out of stuff. Here, that's worked into a lot as well. I enjoyed her. Olga Korlienko, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, I apologize. Her as Taskmaster doesn't get much to do, despite being on a lot of the marketing and including the thumbnail that I'm using for this video. That's all I will say. And then we have Bucky, the Winter Soldier, played by Sebastian Stan. And, we just saw him briefly in Captain America Brave New World. Again, we also had the Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show dedicated a lot of time to him. He's great. I always liked him as the character. I always loved him, I should say, because, the whole arc between him and Steve Rogers, and then, him coming into his own as a character, even after Steve Rogers has since moved on from being Captain America and being retired. And, this ragtag group of heroes, I think, work well with the time that they were given, because they are sparring a lot of the time. When they initially meet, it's like, oh my God, what are you doing? Who are you? What are you doing here? All that stuff. And we also have a few more notable characters here as well. The main villain of sorts, you can say, is Julia Louis-Dreyfus, as Valentina. She was introduced before, of course, I believe in Falcon and Winter Soldier. My mind is kind of a little warped right now. But yeah, she was introduced in the past, and she was a foil. And then I think she was in the post-credit scene of Black Widow as well, too. Yeah, I always like her in movies. She is very likable. And here, playing someone who's just trying to work the system, work the PR angle, and just try to control them, and she's the reason they all come together too. I thought that worked for what the movie was going for. We also have her assistant played by Geraldine Vishwastanathan. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. I apologize if I butchered that. She has quite a bit to do, and she has time together with Bucky in a lot of moments, mostly over the phone, but how they're working in the whole story and narrative flow of the movie. And then the last big member I gotta mention of the cast here, the characters, is Bob, played by Louis Pullman, Bill Pullman's son. How funny, he's playing another character named Bob after his character Bob in Top Gun Maverick, my favorite movie of 2022. And we all know who he is. I'm not going to say anything, no spoilers in this review, in case you don't know what his whole deal is, but, he was originally going to be played by Stephen Yeun, but I think Pullman, I should say, playing this character, I think it was interesting that he played him here, because he seems so unimposing at first, but of course, there's more to what he's going into with the story, and again, I don't want to give it away, but Pullman, I thought worked for what was going on, and it also goes into the big angle of mental health that the movie dives into. There's also a little bit of a bond between himself and Yelena in the movie that I quite enjoyed. So all in all, the cast and the performances here, I think that they were pretty outstanding. And with a more serious tone that the movie takes, I think that is one thing that the movie does take in stride, which brings me into the writing. The writing of this movie brings it in a lot of ways back to basics for what Marvel has done lately. It does feel like a more intimate kind of angle, a more intimate kind of story being told. We begin with Yelena, and then we eventually work into the other characters that come together, and these characters are brought together because of Valentina, and they're tasked to kill each other, but then it's like, oh, we realize it's Valentina who's the reason that we're all here, and then yeah, they go off and try to go after her, and then there's the whole thing with Bob going on too. And I think that with how the movie is going on and having a lot of moments that are either very heart to heart with going into what these characters have gone through in past trauma, or even some of the sparring that we do see, I think that it's worked out in a balance here. And I mentioned mental health just now and a bit ago, because this movie is morose. This is Marvel's most morose movie I can remember, at least, with how dour it is in its tone. But it is mental health heralding throughout it. And, one could say, oh, if you're trying to work in something so big and important like this into a superhero or comic book movie like this, it's like, well, how could it work? I thought it did, because I thought there was sincerity, and a lot of the angle with Yelena, for example, specifically, a lot of focus put on her, and then also with Bob. I think that's what made it speak to me in some ways, and for everybody, because, mental health really is of the utmost importance to everybody, and even in a context like this, to where, yeah, these anti-heroes are brought together, they fight initially, and then also just go ahead and team up. I think that does make the movie refreshingly radical. I think that it makes it one of the more unique Marvel movies that we've gotten in recent memory. And the way it flows all together, I think the directing here did help out in having it all paced together. The movie's directed by Jake Schreier, I believe it's Schreier. Previously, I have seen the feature film that he directed from 2015, the film adaptation of John Green's Paper Towns, which this summer turns 10 years old, which, oh my god, I cannot believe this movie is almost a decade old. And yeah, I quite enjoyed this a lot when I first saw and reviewed it all those years ago now. He's also known for directing a lot of music videos, including the one for We Cry Together by Kendrick Lamar and Taylor Page. Basically, both of them just yelling at each other in an argument, and going about it. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And yeah, so I'm familiar with his work prior to this. And here in a big action film like this, I know he also did the mini-series Beef, which I haven't seen, unfortunately, but I should. Sorry if I keep switching or moving around with my phone here. My arm's getting tired. But anyway, yeah, what he does in just guiding this all together, we go back and forth between some action, but then the movie, at least when it goes into its third act, it goes for something different. It goes for an unconventional third act, like how the movie is basically being unconventional in a lot of ways, because it's not just flash bang boom action all the time. I think that when it gets into the third act, it really does spotlight that whole mental health angle. And guiding it all together is evened out with some levity, some lighter moments as well. Now, it's been said, at least more recently, I think more people have been pointing this out than not, that with the whole trademark Marvel humor, the comedy bits and angles, I mean, not all of it lands, you know, same thing with how comedy, like everything is subjective, you know, some things I was like, okay, the movie's already going for this tone, but, you know, a lot of laughs were had with Red Guardian, for example, or just stuff to break up the pacing in between, unless you're a stone cold serious movie, like about a really dark historic event or something like that. There's comedy that's needed to break up everything to keep it flowing. And the movie runs at just over 2 hours. So including the end credits, of course, you got to stay for the post-credit scenes. The mid-credits one is more of a comedic one, but then the one at the very end, sets up a lot, and it stems off of what the ending of the movie does. And it's not just a tease. It goes on for a few minutes, I would say. Yeah. So it just goes into all that. But there's also technical elements here that I gotta praise. The original score by Son Lux. They were known for their score for Everything Everywhere All at Once most recently. They got Oscar nominated for that. And you know, it fits in line with how the tone of the movie is in terms of you know, it being a lot more on the down low, a lot more like, you know, introspective and just focusing on what these characters are going through internally, mentally, just all this that is in there. Not one of my favorite Marvel scores per se, but I do think that it worked in well. The way the movie is shot, the way it looks. Now, a lot of people have also complained lately, not just with superhero comic book movies, like how a lot of big budget Hollywood movies go for this very washed out or gray look. This movie is unmistakably monotone in its whole color palette. It's very gray, it's dreary looking, but I think it works in this context because its tone, like I said, it's matching all of that goes together, especially when we get into the third act involving this unconventional set piece and then some of the action going in between. I think the movie does look well. I saw this movie at my local chain's equivalent of a premium large format. Again, shout out Classic Cinemas like I do in almost every one of my reviews that I mention Classic Cinemas, that I see a movie at Classic Cinemas. Yeah, I saw it on the biggest screen I could at my closest theater, and yeah, I thought it looked well. The way it is framed and like cut together, the choreography with the action I thought was well done too. A lot of hand-to-hand combat sequences with most of these characters like, you know, being skilled in some sort of martial art or just like phasing in and out like Ghost does, or yeah, kind of like that. And then a few VFX shots here and there if you know what I'm hinting at, of course, if you've seen the movie. And then how the movie just really is something that I feel that among the Marvel movies lately, again, it's one of the more unique ones because it really isn't that big in scale, but it is focusing on a lot more character motives, a lot of character depth, and I think that is what makes this movie instantly one of the more standout ones that we gotten lately. I know Marvel has been really hit and miss, at least in terms of Phase 5, and of course everyone is saying post-Avengers Endgame, post the Infinity Saga, that's been the case. But, you know, looking back, if you want me to quickly recap what I thought of Phase 5, I mean, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, I thought was easily the weakest of the Ant-Man movies. And, you know, this weekend we were supposed to get Kang Dynasty. Today, May 2nd, 2025, it was supposed to be the day that we got Avengers Kang Dynasty. But, of course, stuff is falling through, and, of course, we got Thunderbolts instead. You know, first weekend in May, for as long as I can remember, like the last decade and a half, we always began with a Marvel movie made in the MCU or outside of it, with the exception of 2020, because pandemic, and then last year we didn't have a Marvel movie open in May. But yeah, anyway, yeah, Quantumania was what came after that? Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, I love that movie. That is easily one of my favorites in the MCU, my favorite of Phase 5. You know, that was a great end to a great trilogy. You know, the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie I'm impartial to. It's my favorite MCU movie. And the first time, if you don't know, I did an on-camera review here on my YouTube channel where I showed my face and all back in August of 2014. Then we had the Marvels, which I thought sucked. You know, that's easily one of the bottom MCU movies. You know, I really didn't gel with that movie at all. Then last year we only had Deadpool and Wolverine in July. And, you know, I liked it a lot in the moment while watching in the theater opening weekend. But now that the novelty has worn off, you know, I still stand by what I said initially in that it was weakly written. I think that outside of, you know, the clever callbacks, comedy, and nostalgia baiting or whatever and stuff, you know, that's really what the movie had mainly. Even though I still found it to be entertaining and I enjoyed it, yeah, I don't think it's as, you know, amazing or mind-blowing or whatever as many people have said. Earlier this year, we got Captain America Brave New World, which that's one of the worst reviewed MCU movies to date now, and I don't think it's as bad as some people say it is. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's anything like above the line or like top tier Marvel. Far from fantastic, I should say, but not horrible either. And then speaking of Fantastic Four, that is the next MCU movie we're getting in July, this July, the Fantastic Four First Steps. And, you know, that is the one of the 3 MCU movies this year I was looking forward to the most. Even with that, till we're held over in the next couple months, we have Thunderbolts now. And again, if you couldn't tell, you know, I really enjoyed Thunderbolts. Aside from what I mentioned in some of the comedy bits not working, I guess the only other stuff I could say that doesn't work is that sometimes I felt like there could have been more focus on one character versus another. I mean, mostly to Yelena, which I ain't complaining about because, you know, Florence Pugh is just perfection. And yeah, I mean, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect movie by any means. But, you know, you compare this, or at least I would compare this to at least other MCU movies lately. And again, now that we're rounding out Phase 5, this is easily my second favorite of Phase 5, just behind Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And we'll see where everything goes now because, you know, right now, Avengers Doomsday is filming and, you know, a lot of the consequences, or at least a lot of what happened in the conclusion of this movie is going to segue into that and into the near future from what I'm going to surmise. Again, no spoilers here, but yeah, but I really enjoyed Thunderbolts. I think this was a bit of a surprise for me because I went in, you know, looking forward to it, but the movie did give me a bit more than I was expecting, and I didn't expect some things, and I feel that with the whole angle it's going for, I think most people will come away satisfied with this movie, and I think that it is one of the ones that is not necessarily for the MCU. It's not going to be one of the ones for films that's going to turn it around right away, per se. I mean, I think the big test is going to be Doomsday next year, on top of Fantastic Four later this summer, now that we're officially in the summer movie season for this year, first weekend in May. But yeah, we'll see how that all goes around. But in the end, I definitely recommend Thunderbolts. Again, I really enjoyed this movie. If you're a fan of Marvel, of course, you probably have already seen it by now. Please, no spoilers in the comments. And if you haven't seen it already and you're going to, of course, you're going to have to soon before all the post-credit stuff gets leaked online. But yeah, in any sense, though, yeah, this is a movie I definitely recommend. With all that being said, my final verdict for Thunderbolts with an asterisk, which I do explain in the movie. I forgot to mention that, but I thought it was a nice callback. Ooh, car. Okay, whatever. But anyway, again, all that's left to do now is to give my final verdict for Thunderbolts, and my final verdict for Thunderbolts is 4 out of 5 stars. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment on what you thought of Thunderbolts, social media links in the description, subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll catch you on the next movie review.